Hello and welcome back to Raw Sport. I'm your host Will Kingswood, and today we're looking at the start of the Premier League season as we're filming this. Brentford, top of the table after their 2-0 win against Arsenal last night. Obviously, that means Arsenal rounding out the bottom in 20th, but will they stay there? I guess that's the thing we're trying to predict. We've got our list of tables, and we'll just be running through them, deciding why we've put each team in each place, but obviously I can't do that on my own. So first, I'll bring in Raw's head of sport, Cam Hall. How are you, Cam?
I'm good. I feel I've just stolen your job there, Will, but it's great to be back. And yeah, of course, a lot coming up on Raw this year. And I guess as well to any freshers who are tuning in as well, whether this is the first time you've ever tuned into anything that we've done at Raw, it's a little bit of a flavour of the sort of thing that you'll get over the next year, not just on Raw Sport, but across all of the departments, including the news department as well, that I run. So yeah, really good if you are watching. But aside from that, yeah, I'm doing good. I've just had my second dose this morning. So yeah, certainly if the chills start coming in whilst I'm doing this video, I'll try and cover it up as my excitement for the Premier League this season. But it's going to be a great season. Can't wait to talk about what's coming up this year, because there is a lot to look forward to.
Yeah, I mean, first season in 1.5 years with fans back in the stadium, and as we saw last night, that really made a difference in terms of the atmosphere and possibly in terms of the result. But you're not my only guest on the show. We also have Dan. How are you, Dan?
I'm good, thank you. Really happy to be here. Really happy to be back. I've been gone a while, but yeah, I'm really looking forward to the new season. I was so happy to watch a Premier League game after the long break. I mean, it wasn't that much of a break from the Euros, but it felt like forever for me because I just live and breathe football. And yeah, I'm really happy to be here, and really looking forward to everything that we're going to do this year in Raw Sport.
Yeah, no, we've got lots of plans coming up. Obviously, we'll bring back Super Saturday in the studio. We'll be having a live coverage of all of the 3 o'clock games, giving our opinions, our thoughts as all the goals go in. We've also got other sports. We do our F1 shows, and if you have any requests for what sort of shows you want, then of course, send them over to us and we can make something happen. But today is not about other sports. Today is about football. Just on the bottom there, you can see the Premier League fixtures. So Brentford have already beaten Arsenal 2-0. Man United versus Leeds in the early kickoff. And then the 3 o'clock games are Leicester, Wolves, Chelsea, Crystal Palace, Watford, Aston Villa, Everton, Southampton, Burnley, Brighton. And then you've got Norwich, Liverpool in the late game, and Newcastle, West Ham, and Tottenham, Man City are the games tomorrow. But what we'll be doing is we'll sort of Dan's camera has fallen over. That's fine. But what we'll be doing is we'll be running through. We've got our tables, as I mentioned earlier, and we'll be running through in different parts where we think everyone's going to finish up. So what we'll do is we'll start with the top 4 battle. So I'll ask who have they got top 4? I'll come to you, Cam. Who have you got in your top 4?
So for me, the top 4, and by a very clear margin as well, over 5th as well. I think this is going to be a rather unchallenged top 4, unlike what we've had in the last couple of seasons where there's been 1 or 2 teams kind of on the cusp. I've got Chelsea winning their first title in 5 years this season. Manchester City coming very close, but being denied, coming in second place. A bit of a gap then back to a very tight battle for third and fourth between Liverpool and Manchester United. I've got Liverpool just pipping United there on that one. So it's the same. I'm predicting the same top 4 as has been for the last 2 seasons, although slightly different order this time round. Chelsea, City, Liverpool, Man United.
I mean, Dan, what would you agree with that, or what's your top 4?
Chelsea. What did he say? Chelsea, City, Liverpool, Man United. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think I've got every single team in a different place, which is interesting. So I've gone for City, Liverpool, Chelsea, Man United. Yeah, I think City are too strong. With the additions, just with Grealish, I think they'll win it. With Kane, it won't even be a competition. But I think that in general, the top 4 is looking very strong this year. The strongest we've seen for a while.
Yeah, and again, I'm different to all of you. I've got the same top 4, but in the order of City, Chelsea, United, and Liverpool. I think after after the spend of 100 million on Jack Grealish, City have to win it. There's no second option really. They can't really afford not to win it, especially after the amount they've spent over the last few years. I think Chelsea, with the signing of Lukaku, has definitely sort of improved an area they were really weak in over the last season, because obviously it seemed like Timo Werner couldn't score anything. They've also got better players now. Kai Havertz has seemed to come into his own, Mason Mount after his performances at the Euros. So I do think Chelsea second, United third. I think they've just improved the areas some of the areas that they're weakest in, and then Liverpool fourth, who haven't really made any signings, but you can't really count them out. I mean, can you?
Not at all. I mean, with Liverpool, I was going to say, obviously, they have made the one signing in Konate, who obviously, given their centre-back problems last season, I think they needed stronger cover there. And I think that was brought out to them with the fact when they did lose pretty much everyone that they could have done at centre-back. Konate is a very good player. I could easily see he'll slot in, I think, very well against Virgil van Dijk. I think it'll be an interesting battle between him and Joe Gomez for that second spot. I think Gini Wijnaldum is a huge loss for Liverpool, and I think they're going to feel that throughout the season. And I think certainly looking at the players they've got in the midfield, I'm looking to see who steps into that spot, whether it is Naby Keita, whether it is another one of their midfielders that they're bringing up, someone like Curtis Jones possibly could use this season as a real launch pad for him. But Liverpool aren't the team they were a couple of seasons ago, I think. And I think one thing that I think a lot of people haven't discounted as well is that Salah and Mane do go to the Africa Cup of Nations in January. And I feel that is going to hurt Liverpool. And I think that is, to be honest, the most important thing that's going to deny them that shot at the title. Because at the end of the day, Chelsea have that match winner now in Lukaku. He's going to be the one who's going to get them goals. He is a 30-goal-a-season striker. He is a player that will feed off this fantastic creativity that Chelsea have really harnessed under Tuchel. Kai Havertz and Mason Mount, genuinely, I think, two of the best attacking players, not just in the league, but in the world at the moment, in terms of how they can create and work in that Chelsea team. City, you don't have to look much further. I think, as Dan said, as a team, in terms of the creativity, in terms of the players that they have in that team, on paper, probably the best starting 11 in the Premier League. They are still missing that recognised striker. There's obviously Harry Kane comes in, that's a different ballpark. But I just think Lukaku, even as much as Harry Kane would add to Man City, Lukaku, I just think, is just one step ahead. And what he's going to bring to that Chelsea side, looking at the hole that they had to plug last year, could they do with a stronger centre-back? Possibly. Could they do potentially with a stronger keeper than Edouard Mendy? I'm not sure. He did do very well, kept a lot of clean sheets last season. Is there more room for improvement? Possibly. But I just think Lukaku is that signing that just tips Chelsea over the edge. And you look as well at Tuchel and the way he was his tactics in the big games, his tactics against Guardiola in particular last season, he will get Chelsea those big 6-pointers when they need them. And I think at the end of the day, that could be the difference for them this season.
I mean, Dan, what are sort of your thoughts on the whole Chelsea situation?
I'm a United fan, and I remember Lukaku at Manchester United. And there were times you thought, what a striker. And there were times you thought he couldn't hit a barn door. Now, unless, I know he's done very well over in Serie A, and it would be a lazy comment to say that he isn't good enough for the Prem, because that's just not true, because we've seen that he is good enough for the Prem. What Lukaku are we going to see at Chelsea? We're going to see the one who was very hit and miss at Manchester United, for example. I remember he scored 2 goals against PSG, which everyone kind of forgets about when we in the comeback win. But then he goes and misses a sitter against Arsenal the next week and never scores again for United. So what Lukaku are we going to see? Are we going to see one who is, fit, firing on all cylinders? I think he's very much a confident striker, which, the majority of strikers are. Because if they can get that right, if they find that correct striker, because Timo Werner, even with Timo Werner, they still won the Champions League, so they aren't far away from being Premier League winners. If he is the missing piece of the puzzle, then yeah, they could definitely win the Champions League. And if they can get Kai Havertz firing, if they can find a way to play him and Mount in sort of like an interchanging fluid system, if they can get Ziyech to have more an impact than he perhaps has had in the past, if they can get all those pieces of the puzzle just to fit and click, then I think they'll be a real contender this season. Having said that, you look at City's squad. City's first 11 is incredible because Guardiola, we know that he doesn't necessarily need a striker to put out a first 11. But even their second 11 is just ridiculous. I mean, you look at Aymeric Laporte, one of the best centre-backs in world football. We'd have said that a couple of years ago now because he hasn't played. We're not that sure. He doesn't get into the starting 11. Like, he plays Diaz and Stones. And he's spent so much money on fullbacks. He's got a great array of fullbacks at his disposal. Maybe left-back's a bit weak. But yeah, that City team, just the squad's incredible. The manager, incredible. And yeah, I think Liverpool, it's a difficult one because a few seasons ago, everyone was talking about how they were going to win numerous Premier Leagues on the trot. And they sort of disappeared last year. Was that all down to Virgil van Dijk, or was that down to other things? They've lost Wijnaldum, as has already been said. But they still have probably three of the best four defenders in world football in Trent, Van Dijk and Robertson. One of the best, if not the best goalkeeper, and an incredible front three, who if you bring Diego Jota into the mix, then yeah, a great impact sub, or if you're going against weaker teams, I'll probably play a 4-2-4. And then you've got Manchester United, my team, who have made two great signings. I don't think anyone can deny that. And last year finished second. So, you know, they're finished second. They've improved their team. And yeah, everyone seems to be, well, no one really seems to be talking about them as as title contenders, which is interesting to me. They've sorted out that right wing role. They found Harry Maguire a partner. And yeah, I think they've spent their money very efficiently, and I think it's going to be a really interesting, not just top four battle, but all of those four teams have very good chances of winning the league.
No, I would agree. I mean, I think all of those four teams do have a very good chance. I just think that it's the City second 11 that will win it for them. I mean, we saw it last season when the fixtures came on thick and fast after Christmas and going into January. That's when they went on their 14 game winning streak, when they had the capabilities of resting their players but still replacing them with players that were like top class, and other teams couldn't afford to do that. I mean, they won obviously because they had a very good defense, very good midfield, very good attack, but they had a very good defense, midfield and attack even when they weren't playing their first 11. And I think you'd have to think that will still come in this year, even if the fixture congestion isn't as bad as it was last year. I mean, Chelsea, I think definitely that it will come down to whether they can get Lukaku and Havertz and Mount and even Werner and Ziyech firing. If they can get all of those players firing, obviously we could say that for every team, but I think it really does matter for Chelsea more, especially in that attacking role, especially with Lukaku. If we see the Lukaku of your Everton and your Inter Milan, then Chelsea will be up there, and I think that's why I put them second. But again, I'm a Manchester United fan. It's hard to say. It almost feels like we've done things, but we've done them less. So City and Chelsea have got the marquee signings. We still spent quite a bit of money, but it almost feels like because they've spent more that we haven't been as highly publicized as City and Chelsea. I think possibly if we do get a CDM, so you're thinking a writer and Ndidi or someone else, then it could be an option for us to challenge into first place. But I do think it's probably more between City and Chelsea, and then Liverpool and United battling out for the top four finish. I mean, Ken, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, United's glaring problem is that CDM central midfield role. And in the end of the day, in the Premier League, whether it's creatively or whether it's just by having physical strength, you have to be able to control the midfield. I don't look at United's midfield and it doesn't scream to me like a midfield that can control the game. And I think certainly you look at the players, Nemanja Matic 5 seasons ago was a title winning player. He was that player who would dominate the midfield for you. and would really give you that ability to stabilize your defense and give you some confidence there and allow you to go forward. They don't have that player now in Nemanja Matic in a way that someone like N'Golo Kante, for example, is at Chelsea. And I think, again, another big, often underrated reason behind the marquee signings why I think Chelsea are going to win the league. But aside from that, I think if United can sort that out and they can bring in someone like a Declan Rice or an Ndidi, then there is, I think, a real opportunity for them to push up higher up the table. And I think United's transfer dealings, for considering some of what they've been like under the last few years, this has been a very good window because United have gone out and got the players that they needed in the right positions. Jadon Sancho was that creative player, that consistent creative player United needed. Rafa Varane is very much that stable centre-back that gives United a proper stable centre-back partnership, which we've not really seen over the last few years. Lindelof, Maguire, Bailly, Maguire, they've never looked the most convincing as partnerships. Varane, Maguire will be a convincing partnership, but they do need to sort out the centre of midfield. They do need someone who I think is someone who would have done what Nemanja Matic would have done 5 years ago, a younger player who can dominate and can control that midfield and allow players like Paul Pogba, Bruno Fernandes to perform at their best, to allow them to go forward and be creative. Because as we saw at the Euros, Paul Pogba is a player who on his day is electric, who can dominate the pitch, who can make things happen. But the system at United doesn't work for him. They don't have that player at CDM to allow him to be so creative, to be so free. That's the signing United needs. And if they can get that out of Pogba and bring more out of Fernandes in that front three, they could push higher up into the top four. But I think that's the thing for now that's just keeping them in fourth for me.
Okay. And Dan, any last words on the top four?
Yeah. I mean, a centre defensive mid is definitely one of the final pieces of the puzzle, if not the last. A right back, maybe, just to sort of fill in that role that Alex Telles did for Luke Shaw, to push him on, to give him more motivation. We know that Wan-Bissaka isn't the best in the attack, and Kieran Trippier has been mooted as a possible signing. I think Atletico Madrid want a bit too much from what Fabrizio Romano has been saying. So yeah, I think at the moment that's going to be our signings. But I still think it's a great team. I still think it's better than anything we've had for the last few years at least. I think I could talk for hours about Paul Pogba and just everyone saying, "Oh, you just need to get the right players to play alongside him." And I'm still not sure what to think of that, because if you're spending £90 million for a player, you want them to be able to play in any system. But yeah, I'm not going to even say anything about Paul Pogba because I really like him, but I just don't know what to think of him anymore as a player. So yeah, I'm not going to get into that wormhole.
Yeah, so that was our top four battle. What we'll do is we'll put our full tables in the description of whatever you're listening to this to, so you can come back in May and figure out how wrong we were when Leicester inevitably win the league for the second time. So we're coming on to our European scrap, so our 5th to 9th. I mean, I'll run through mine quickly. I put Leicester in 5th, Tottenham in 6th, I put Leeds in 7th, West Ham in 8th, and Everton in 9th. I mean, Cam, what's your 5th to 9th?
So from 5th to 9th, so I have got Leicester in 5th, a bit of away from the top four, but clear daylight between 5th and 6th. With Leicester, I think the boys from the FA Cup last season, I think they're a very well-run club with very shrewd transfer business as well. It's a very secure 5th again for them this season. I've got Arsenal, despite last night, coming in 6th, and I've also attached to Arsenal that I do think they will win the FA Cup last season. I do think Arteta is going to put a lot of emphasis on getting some silverware in with his young team. So I've got them coming in 6th. I've got West Ham in 7th, I think, following up last season with, I think, another very strong, consistent season from them, despite issues with squad depth that I think we can talk about. Certainly, I think West Ham are going to really pull on, and David Moyes has a system going there. Tottenham, I think all of the drama that's been going on at Tottenham this summer, we're over with the manager, with Harry Kane. There's clearly disquiet going on. I think that's going to affect their playing style and their performances this season. So I've got them coming into 8th. And then Aston Villa, with, I think, some very shrewd signings to replace Jack Grealish. If they all come off, I've got them coming in 9th.
Okay, and I mean, Dan, what's your 5th to 9th place?
So I've gone Tottenham 5th. Now that might be an interesting one, but it's not that Tottenham are very good, because they're not. They're not very good. They're good. They've got Heung-min Son, which is basically the difference, in my opinion. I think Leicester overperformed last season. I don't think they'll be as good as they were last season. Through no fault of Brendan Rodgers, it's just if you look at his squad and the other squads, he hasn't got that standout player. Having said that, I think Arsenal finished 6th, so Arsenal ahead of Leicester. Leicester 7th, West Ham 8th, and my probably, I've got a soft spot for Brighton, so I'm going to say them 9th. I really like Graham Potter. I don't know why. There's just something about him which he comes across as a very football fanatic, I suppose you say, in the sort of same way that Pep Guardiola is. I think he's a very good manager. I think he is criminally underrated. I think he's what everyone thinks that Rauf Hasenhüttl is. So yeah, Brighton. So Tottenham 5th, Arsenal 6th, Leicester 7th, West Ham 8th, and Brighton 9th. Those are my picks.
Okay, I mean, we'll start with the 3 teams that we've all put 5th to 9th in some sort of order: Leicester, West Ham, and Tottenham. I think you can't really, as Cam said, you can't really look past Leicester as definitely one of those teams that will be in that mix, that probably won't be top 4, you never know, but they definitely will be at some in 5th to 9th. I think that's a fairly safe prediction from us. And then you got West Ham, obviously coming off the back of a very good last season. The only issue I might see is that they now have European football, and with a thin squad that they have, they might be a bit further down than they were last season. I'm thinking your Southamptons, your Wolveses that were in Europe and then did sort of suffer from it, and then your Tottenhams. I think Dan's got Tottenham highest in 5th. I've got them in 6th, and Cam's got them in 8th. I do think that really depends on whether Harry Kane stays. If Harry Kane doesn't stay, I think I'd move Tottenham down a few places. But at the moment, I think 6th place for me, I think, seems a fairly decent prediction. I mean, Cam, what would you think about those 3 teams?
Yeah, I'd say Leicester, I think, always have a very strong squad. I think that's the thing that distinguishes them. There's no marquee players necessarily in the Leicester side. There are some very good players in there. Yuri Tielemans, I think, is a player who's come on a lot over the last season. I think just in the last few months. And I think he's someone who's really starting to establish himself in that Leicester side. Harvey Barnes is back as well. We saw glimpses from him last season of just really how good he could be for that team. James Maddison, I know there's a lot of uncertainty over James Maddison, but on his day, he is a player who could arguably be one of the best attackers in the Premier League, and someone who, again, has really come on over the last few seasons. And I think Brendan Rodgers' tutelage has helped there. Jamie Vardy, I think, the last person to say about Leicester, consistently scoring goals, at least sort of on the high 15 to 20 goals a season for Leicester. Jamie Vardy was injured, of course, for a bit of last season, and you could somewhat tell a difference in performances. But I feel like even though Vardy's coming towards the end of his career, he's still in rich goal scoring form. And that's going to be vital to get Leicester up into 5th. And I just think looking at that team, not just on the pitch as well, but I think some of what's going on off the pitch will rub onto the players on the pitch as well. It's a well-run club. There's a really good positivity, a really good connection between the owners and the fans and the players. And I think that harmony is something you can't always rule out in terms of having an impact. And I think that's really what gets Leicester a secure 5th spot, especially now with the experience of winning silverware as well. That's going to buoy that team a lot. Arsenal have a very young side, a very exciting young side. I heard they may still be going in for Martin Odegaard, who I feel if they can get Odegaard, that just kind of adds a little bit more strength to that attacking lineup. But a lot of the players coming through, Emile Smith-Rowe, Bukayo Saka, these are genuinely exciting young players who I think Arteta is really starting to mould the team more in the image he was looking for. I think Ben White as well is a very shrewd signing at centre-back. He played some fantastic games for Brighton last season and was really crucial when they weren't scoring with the 5th highest expected goals in the league. He was crucial to them getting those points by being so strong at the back. And looking at that Arsenal defence, they need someone who's going to be a presence, someone who can marshal that defense. Now, I'm not saying Ben White will do that immediately. He's still very young, but he's someone who can grow into that. And I think that's a very good signing in the longer term for Arsenal. Tottenham, a lot depends on Harry Kane. We've said that, with Harry Kane, they do, if he goes, it takes a lot of the goals and the assists out of Tottenham as well. And that's something that could really hurt them. They do have quality players, though, in that side, aside from Harry Kane. We've mentioned Son Heung-min. Pierre-Emile Højbjerg, on his day, was one of the best defensive midfielders last season, certainly at the start of last season. Hugo Lloris, again, an inconsistent keeper, but again, on his day, very strong. I think Tottenham's defence is something that was so crucial to them getting up towards the top of the league a few seasons ago. That has regressed. Alderweireld's going, I think, is a loss for Tottenham. Obviously, still got Davinson Sanchez, but Eric Dyer isn't someone that you would want at centre-back. And that squad has just been slowly regressing and slowly losing the quality, allowed it to get to the top. And I think with Nuno Espirito Santo now as manager, he is someone who does know how to build a team and take it up, as we saw with Wolves. But Tottenham's a very different challenge to that. Daniel Levy is someone who's very tight with the purse strings as well. And I don't think is going to give Nuno the backing that he got at Wolves to really develop that squad. So I am concerned for Tottenham, because it seems all the optimism, even the optimism we had for them when they were performing well at the start of last season, just seems to be slowly sliding away from that club now. And given the big hopes that they had only a couple of seasons ago, it feels that the sort of the heyday of the Pochettino era is just slowly eroding now. And I think that's a very sad thing, given just how much that club have built up these young players and created this very exciting squad. It feels like Tottenham are going to do a Tottenham almost and bottle it at the last second.
Yeah, I mean, you can't really say much about Tottenham, especially given that they still, all their transfer business seems to still be up in the air. I mean, Dan, what are your thoughts on the three teams that we've all got fifth and ninth? So your Leicesters, your West Ham, and your Tottenhams.
I mean, we've just talked about Tottenham. We've just discussed them. I think Nuno Espirito Santo is a similar coach in a way to Jose Mourinho in that he values wins over attacking football. So they haven't had a massive sort of change in style in manager. Granted, Nuno tends to go for 5 at the back instead of whatever Jose Mourinho goes with. Jose Mourinho is more flexible in his formations. But I think they're just going to grind out a few important wins, like they did last season, to be fair. They beat City 2-0. They played either terribly or very well, either way you want to look at it, whichever way you want to look at it. But they got the win against City. So I just think it's going to be a continual sort of debate about, all right, do you want to finish 5th playing poor football, or do you want to finish, mid-table, but having some decent games, and just sort of having more hope for the future. I think they'll finish 5th. 6th, Arsenal, just because they've got Arteta. I was looking at everyone's comparing the Raphael Varane signing to the Ben White signing, and I don't think that's fair, because Man United and Arsenal are in different stages of their sort of progression as football teams. I think both signings are good for where the teams are at. What I will say about Arsenal, though, is they don't have a centre-back who you'd be scared to come up against as a striker. Harry Maguire would terrify me because he would absolutely flatten me. Raphael Varane, I'd probably just respect too much to actually probably run at or anything, because he's quick, he's strong in the air, he's won everything there is to win. Arsenal have Ben White. Who else played yesterday? I don't know if they've got Gabriel, but he's out injured. They've got Callum Chambers, who they played at right back yesterday. These centre-backs or sort of defenders, there isn't anyone who you'd say is a leader in that team. They're all, because Callum Chambers isn't even that young, but they're not the first name on the team sheet. Well, Ben White might be, but he's young, he's just signed. So there's a bit of a conundrum as to who's going to take charge of that defence, because it's not going to be the goalkeeper. Bernd Leno letting Martinez go was the biggest mistake Arsenal have made in years. And then you come to Leicester. Now, Leicester are the best run club out of those three by far. The thing is with Leicester, as has already been said by Cam, they don't have a marquee player. Vardy is getting on a bit, and I don't think he's going to be the same player. He's 35 now, and even though he was still going strong last season, time catches up with everyone. He's going to lose some of that pace, I think. That's why they're saying Daka. They've already prepared for the sort of demise of Jamie Vardy. They've got Iheanacho, another good player, not a great player, a good player. I just think they haven't got the star players that, Aubameyang, even though he's getting on a bit, is still a great player. Heung-min Son, great player. Harry Kane, if they can keep him, great player. They haven't got that name, and that's what concerns me about them. But yeah, I think there's a massive difference between those three teams and the top four in terms of quality. And I think then below that, there's a big difference as well.
Yeah, I mean, you've spoken about Arsenal. I haven't put them in the 5th to 9th. I've put them 10th, and I just think that they haven't really got a star. They haven't really got a star player at the moment. Aubameyang, you'd argue, is probably the closest one there, but even he's misfiring. He's sort of like being like a Timo Werner. Like he should be scoring, but he isn't. And I just can't see where Arsenal's goals come from, and I don't think their defense is as strong as it needs to be to challenge probably for Europe. Obviously, they're not in Europe this season. That might make a difference, but it's hard to say. I think possibly I've been a bit harsh on them, putting them 10th, but I can't see Arsenal being up there, being challenging for maybe Europa League, that will be your 5th and your 6th. I've put Leeds in 7th. I think that Leeds especially will kick on from last season. They've brought in Jack Harrison permanently, brought in Junior Firpo from Barcelona. That there's no reason that Leeds can't really do well this season. They've not really lost anyone. They played good attacking football last season, and if they can sort out not losing to some of the weaker sides and keep on beating the stronger sides, like we saw last season. They beat Man City. They drew with Manchester United. Those are the ones I can remember. I'm sure they definitely took points off the bigger sides more. But that's why I think Leeds are up there and possibly could challenge for Europe. And then we'll come on to we've all got different teams for 9th. I've put Everton, Cam's put Aston Villa, and Dan has put Brighton. Do you want to run through why you think Aston Villa are going to be sort of up there in 9th?
Yeah, so Villa's an interesting one. So I originally did the table. I had them down in 13th, but I've kind of thought about this. And with Villa, I made a lot of that judgment based upon the games they didn't have Grealish last season. The fact that Villa without Grealish, when he was out injured towards the end of last season, were not as good as they were with Grealish. You could tell the difference. And so I was kind of thinking about that. And I think that kind of originally I put them quite low. But the more I kind of think about some of their transfer business, I think Buendia is a fantastic player who I think can provide not what Grealish did, but can cover a lot of what Grealish did. And he is a player as well with Premier League experience, having played at Norwich. And even though he's been in the Championship with Norwich last season, he's got experience of English football, a lot of the physicality of it, and in particular, some of the kind of the lower mid-table scraps that Villa are going to need to win to be able to get into the top 10. So I think that's a good signing. Ashley Young is a very shrewd signing. Yes, Ashley Young is getting on a bit. He is an older player, but he is, he was only a couple of years ago in the starting 11 for the England squad. This is a player who provides a lot, not just going back defending as well, but also going forward as well, and can really bring some intent to that Villa side. And I just think that experience that Ashley Young bring, I think, is going to do so much for Aston Villa and really galvanise that squad in a way. On the other flank, if Ashley Young does that on the left, I think Leon Bailey is a very shrewd signing on the right. He's been in fantastic form for Leverkusen over the last couple of years. He's going to bring some real pace as well to that Villa side. And really, I think very much a lot of the signings that Villa have done have very much brought what Grealish did, but over more players. And so I think that's something that Dean Smith can really use to kick on with and I think, provide a very attacking threat for Villa this season, which I think ultimately, I don't think Villa are going to win games necessarily by defending, although Emiliano Martinez is one of the best keepers in the league. And I think, as Dan said, clearly has been shown to be a big loss to Arsenal by the way he's just been able to perform at Villa and have that freedom to keep those clean sheets. He will keep quite a few clean sheets, but Villa will get into the top 10 because of the way they've shrewdly replaced Grealish across multiple players. And so it means that the effect of losing one of them isn't as much as it was with losing Grealish. And so I think it's going to be very tight. And I think they may just sneak in at the last minute. And I think there's certainly maybe a gulf between them and Tottenham. But Villa will get into ninth. And I think they'll solidify their status in the Premier League in a way that last season, most people had them to be going down. I think they really kicked on last season. This will be the one that really solidifies them as a higher mid-table, possibly pushing for Europe Premier League side.
Okay, and Dan, you put Brighton in ninth.
Yeah.
Bit of a better performance than last season.
Yeah. I mean, Brighton are XG kings. We all know that. I just... it's hard to justify putting Brighton ahead of Everton, ahead of Aston Villa, ahead of Leeds, ahead of Wolves even. But last season, I believe they finished 5th in the XG table. Now, I'm not saying they're going to finish 5th. Almost no chance. But I think they got very unlucky last season. I remember when they played us as in United. They played very well, and we beat them literally after the final whistle had gone with a Bruno Fernandes penalty, like we always do. And yeah, but I think they are a very well-run club. I'd like to have a look at how they play first, but yeah, I don't think they'll perform as they're not going to finish 5th. They're not going to match their XG from last year. However, they finished 16th, 17th, about that ballpark range last season. And I just think they're a much better side than that. Compared to teams who would be hoping to finish ahead of them, Everton haven't really made great inspirational signings, to be honest. Damari Gray and Ambrose Townsend. Is all I'll say to that. I feel for Everton fans. I believe there was a table published by The Athletic of optimism amongst each team's fans, and I'm fairly sure I saw Everton last in that table. They brought in Rafa Benitez, who I don't think is a bad manager. He's a bad manager for Everton. He was at Liverpool for a long time. Just the signings. Andros Townsend. We're not even going to talk about Gylfi Sigurdsson. There's just a lot of a bad aura about Everton at the moment, I feel. And that's why I feel they're not going to be able to finish ahead of Brighton. But yeah, unlucky for Aston Villa not to be there. Having just criticised Everton, I'm going to say that Aston Villa are actually going to finish behind Everton. Just because it's a progression. It's going to be hard without Jack Grealish, as has already been said. But yeah, we'll see how all those parts sort of gel, because I remember after Tottenham sold Gareth Bale and they spent all their money on seemingly good players, it just didn't work for them.
Yeah, I mean, you've sort of mentioned Everton now. I've put them ninth. I just think even though they're not probably as inspiring as they probably could be, that it would, they haven't really lost anyone. So I wouldn't say that they'll go down. And Rafa Benitez is a good manager. He will be able to make things work with them. So I think just keeping them in ninth is probably the best thing that I think they're probably going to hope for. I think ninth would be the best that they could get. But other than that, I don't see them being much lower. And we'll come on to what I think about Aston Villa and Brighton in the next section, mid-table challengers, because that is where I have put them both. So I've gone for, from 10th to 15th, Arsenal, Wolves, Aston Villa, Brentford, and then Brighton and Newcastle in 15th. I mean, Cam, what's your 10th to 15th?
So I've got Leeds in 10th. I think going to kick on from last season. They've kept the players they need to keep. They've kept the manager they need to keep as well. Leeds, I think, are going to really solidify themselves in a similar way to Villa. Wolves, back in 11th. Raul Jimenez is back. That is the difference, I think, between Wolves being able to challenge somewhat, but they have lost some of their higher class players and a manager that kept that squad together. So it's a real transitional season despite Jimenez coming back. So they'll be in 11th. Everton, I think we've pretty much touched upon them. I've got Everton down in 12th. I think the lack of optimism, I think, is justified. I think we've talked about most of what we need to talk about. Everton's transfer window, which seems to have been done in 2016 rather than 2021. And I think arguably the worst decision I think Everton made with the manager. I think Rafa Benitez is a good manager, but there were better managers out there. I think Eddie Howe personally should have got the job. I think a much more attacking coach, similar to the ilk of Ancelotti, someone who has been out of a job for a year, admitted, but someone as well who has a passion to work at Everton, being a boyhood Everton fan all his life. And he is someone who's very much, I think, a new style of English manager, similar vein to Graham Potter, being an attacking manager, I think would have been a perfect fit for Everton, not Benitez. So I've got them in 12th. Newcastle, who I predicted to finish above Leicester, of all teams last season, up in 9th. I think a more realistic prediction for them this season in 13th. Callum Wilson and Saint-Maximin, I think, are key to keeping them fit because Newcastle do look a different squad with them in on their day, as they do as well with Joe Willock, who I think is a crucial signing for them, getting them into 13th. Brighton, the XG Kings of last season, they haven't signed anyone that convinces me that they're going to turn their expected goals into actual goals. And at the end of the day, it's goals that get you points. So I've got them in 14th. I don't think they'll be in the relegation scrap, but I don't think they're going to be pushing on as high as Dan does. And finally, in 15th, I've got Burnley. Every year, Burnley seemingly ends up in and around the relegation battle, but I never see them going down. I've never looked at that team, whether I think a lot of it's down to Sean Dyche and the way he drills that squad and he organises it. The backbone as well, Nick Pope, Tarkowski, Ben Mee, and then also their very physical forwards as well, Chris Wood in particular. I think that is a team that just knows how to stay up in the Premier League. So I've got Burnley coming in 15th.
Right. And Dan, your 10th to 15th mid-table challenges.
So I went Everton, Aston Villa, Leeds, Wolves, and Newcastle. I've already spoken about Everton and Aston Villa. Leeds, I don't think have got as good a squad as the other teams in and around that zone. However, they've got Marcelo Bielsa, who, I mean, Junior Firpo's already come out and said it. He's seen more videos of how Bielsa wants him to play in 2 weeks at Leeds than he saw in 2 years at Barcelona, which, you know, is a criticism of Barcelona, but it's also a compliment to Leeds and how thorough Marcelo Bielsa is. I don't think Patrick Bamford's a great player. I think he's an okay player. I think Calvin Phillips is their best player, I'd say. And I think they've got a solid team, and it's a team that we'll look to in a few years as, I mean, people are already saying, "Oh, can they challenge for Europe?" I don't think so yet, but in a few years, yeah, they'll sort of have strengthened each piece of their team, and yeah, they'll be able to go for Europe. Then I've got Wolves. Now, a couple of seasons ago, we were talking about Wolves as potential Europe, European team. I think, and even perhaps going into the top four. But they've just regressed. They've lost their manager, Nuno, who was down with them back in the Championship. And they don't seem to have the ambition that they did before, when they brought in Ruben Neves, João Moutinho, all those players who you thought that's a massive downgrade for them coming from their team, but then actually took Wolves up to a new level. They don't seem to be making those type of signings anymore. And, I think they're just going to regress. Not so much because they've gotten worse, because they really haven't gone anywhere. Other teams have just improved in relation to them. And then, so I've said 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th. And Newcastle. Yeah, Newcastle. Newcastle are just a solid team with Saint-Maximin in. That's it. They've got an average manager with Steve Bruce. And now we're getting towards teams who I don't think are very good. This is the point where I think they go from being solid to just not very good teams. But because, and they're going to finish 15th because the other teams aren't as good as them. They don't have as much experience of the Premier League in the same way that Newcastle do. and they have a few. Well, they've got Saint-Maximin, who is a very exciting player, and is a player who gets the crowd off their feet. Sorry. Yeah, I think without Saint-Maximin, they'd definitely be in more trouble than they are right now.
Yeah, so I mean, we've all seemed to sort of agree. I think Wolves, as you mentioned there, I think they really, really suffered from Raul Jimenez's injury. It's really good to see him back, but just losing a player that will get you like 10 to 15, almost 20 goals a season, you can't really recover from that. And it almost felt like it's not they were living on borrowed time, it's that they were really performing and then they needed to keep performing to keep maintaining that level. And as soon as they stopped, then sort of the life fell out of them in a way. I think that who else? I think that Newcastle, we've all got Newcastle in there. They're just always there. I don't really have much hope for them. I can't see them being relegated. I think there are definitely 4 or 5 teams that are worse than them. But I mean, I put Brentford in my 10th to 15th. I think Brentford, you could see them sort of being like a Sheffield United, coming up, managing to get sort of good performances in. I don't think that maybe 13th is quite high. I've been quite optimistic there, but they played well last night. I know it was against Arsenal, so can't really say much about that performance, but they did play well, and I think that their first game back, obviously, with fans, but their stadium seems like a place you almost not wouldn't want to go to, but does seem that it's sort of a 12th man for a Brentford that probably need that 12th man. And I mean, last but not least, that me and Cam have put in that range will come to Brighton. Again, I agree with Cam. I don't see that anyone has come in that could help with their expected goals turning into actual goals. And I'm quite surprised that they haven't brought anyone in, because that did seem to be their big issue last season, finishing. And I think if they do bring someone in, I don't see any reason why they can go a lot higher, especially if they find a hidden gem that could get that 10 goals that wouldn't have gone in normally, that would go in. And if they're making the chances and making up like the points to get them up there, I don't see any reason why they couldn't possibly get into the top half of the table. I mean, Cam, I mean, you haven't really got any out there predictions, so do you want to sort of just run through anything else you want to say, really?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things about Brentford, and I think this is something I'll touch upon Brentford, I've got Brentford going down this season. I know quite a few Brentford fans myself who have been really excited about this moment. They've been waiting for so long to get up to the Premier League, and I do think they will do very well. I think this is a season where all the teams that have come up, I think, are going to get in the high 20s, 30 points. There's no one team that I don't think is going to have a disastrous season. So I think every team's going to score and get loads of points. I think the thing with Brentford, and Bournemouth is the exception to the rule in the last few seasons, and I think a lot of that is down to Eddie Howe as much as it is to the players and the team. But if you look at a lot of the teams that have come up in the last few seasons, teams that tend to play a bit more expansive, attacking, attractive football, like Brentford have typically done in the Championship, don't tend to stay up in the Premier League. It's not something that normally works out. The best example, I think, Norwich, coming up a couple of seasons ago when they won the Championship with this very, exciting attacking football, and people really expected Brighton to kick on and do some people expecting almost what Leeds have done right now. Or I don't know if that was potentially too optimistic for Norwich, but they went down after a good first few games. They just crashed and burned. And I just think that in the Premier League, particularly if you're a new side, I think you've got to come up and you've got to really have a strong defensive spine and really cope, I think, with what is the big physical challenge and the big change in the physicality between the Premier League and the Championship. And I say Bournemouth and possibly Wolves as well, the exception to the rule in the last few seasons. But a lot of the teams that have stayed up are those like your Sheffield Uniteds and your Huddersfields, who in the first season did really play some much more defensive football and really made that adaptation to the physicality. I'm not sure that's necessarily something that Brentford have in abundance in that team, despite the fact they do have some very exciting attacking players. I think Ivan Toney is someone who I think has really grown in the last couple of seasons, coming out as a top scorer in the Championship last season. I think he is someone who will get a lot of goals in the Premier League. But I do think Brentford are a side that will concede a few as well. And I think that's ultimately why I can't put them in mid-table and why I think they're going down this season.
Yeah, I mean, it's just hard. I think it's just hard to say. I think they'll do a Sheffield United. They'll do one good season and then maybe collapse back into the relegation zone. But I mean, Dan, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, with Brentford, I've got them as I haven't written numbers next. I have to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so I've got them in 16th. Good maths. And yeah, I think with Brentford, you're talking about how they, sort of lack the physicality that is needed in the Premier League. Yes, to an extent, but at the same time, they've got Ivan Toney, who yesterday was excellent alongside Mbumu. I hope I butchered his name. Not even to say I hope I just haven't pronounced it correctly. There's going to be so much more of that happening next season. I'm so bad with pronunciations. But he was excellent, and his link-up play. He's not just a goal scorer, which is what I assume because I don't watch much Championship football. I saw that he had 33 goals last season in the Championship. I put him into my fantasy team. I thought, am I going to get burned like I've been so many times with Timu Pukki? But I was really happy with what I saw from him yesterday. He didn't get his goal, but some of his, he put in a great cross at one point. And he looks really good physically. He was winning so many headers. Granted, it's against that Arsenal defence, which is weak, for lack of a better word. But I think he's going to be able to pull that Brentford team to a relatively safe 16th position. And then, that's all I have to say on Brentford.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much else to say about this part of the table, really. I think any team, you can have a team that outperforms themselves quite dramatically. You just look to your West Ham's last season, like most people were thinking mid to lower table, finish 6th. Like, there's no reason that, I don't know, a Brighton can't finish up in 7th. And Aston Villa with their new signings, which we've probably mentioned, brought in Danny Ings, Buendia, Leon Bailey. I mean, there's no reason they couldn't finish quite high, but then they could also do what sort of Tottenham did once they sold Gareth Bale, as you mentioned. They could have made a load of signings on a load of players, and then those players don't perform, and they're back down in 16th. Like, it's hard to say with this part of the table. And I mean, Cam, would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, trust me when I'm going over all the Aston Villa signings to forget arguably the most important one that they've made, which is Danny Ings, someone who has been electric at Southampton over the last few seasons, someone who, in scoring, I think, about 20 goals a couple of seasons ago, was someone who's very much been the difference in that team. And I think a lot of Southampton's fall last season from the top of the table to near relegation, I think came with Danny Ings coming out of that side. With Aston Villa, as I said earlier, they've replaced Grealish with more players than what Grealish could provide on his own, which, yes, I think will take time to bed in, but I think is certainly a good long-term prospect. I think will come good by the end of the season. But the partnership between Danny Ings and Ollie Watkins has the potential to be one of the deadliest in the Premier League. Ollie Watkins, I think, was on his day one of the best strikers last season and was someone who I was always very confident about, having seen him at Brentford. But in the Premier League last season, I think he was very unlucky to not make a push for the England squad and to not potentially get into that 26. He, I think, is really going to come on, and being partnered with Danny Ings as well. I think there's real potential for Villa there. And that's why I've just got them going into 9th. Of course, the one team that loses out the most from the Danny Ings transfer is Southampton. Of course, being a Portsmouth fan, my opinion towards Southampton is always slightly biased. But I've got them down in 16th this season. I always do want to relegate them. And it's slightly sad that I can't, because I just feel there are teams that are worse than them this season. But they are in a real rut. And it's something that I don't necessarily feel they know how to get out of. And with Southampton, I think what's going to keep them up are the performances of individuals. James Ward-Prowse, I think, the most important individual to keeping them up. But they are so not the team that they were a few seasons ago under Ronald Koeman, which was producing some of these fantastic players and really developing them to go on to bigger sides. But really, again, almost doing like a Leicester, almost having a really good team of players. Something's gone wrong at Southampton. I don't think they know the way out. It's not enough to relegate them, but there should be more than the alarm bells that are ringing. You know, someone like Armstrong, for example, is not the signing that I would necessarily have made, or at least being the only real signing of note. I think I would be concerned if I was a Southampton fan, and if I was a Portsmouth Football Club fan, I would be celebrating with immense glee. Even if we will inevitably spend another campaign struggling to get out of League One, we can at least enjoy Southampton struggling.
Yeah, I mean, we'll come on to Southampton we've all got them in our final five, so we'll come on to that quickly. But Dan, do you want to just add any last words on Aston Villa and the money they've spent from the Grealish transfer?
Yeah, I can't criticize any of their individual signings. They all look great on paper. That's the thing, on paper. But I've mentioned it before. You know, I've already mentioned it. Tottenham, look what happened. Their signings look great on paper, and did any of them work out? Lamella maybe, because he was there for a few seasons. Soldado certainly didn't. I'm forgetting the rest of them just because they were so just uninspiring looking back on it now. But I'm sure I looked at them at the time and thought they look great. Can you replace one player with a variety of different players in football? I know that people talk about Moneyball, and you know, I've watched the film and everything, and that's how they did it there. But football's different to baseball. So is that necessarily going to work? I don't know. We'll have to see. We'll have to see. They couldn't go and get a like-for-like replacement to Jack Grealish because there isn't one that fitted in their price budget. And to be honest, I don't think there's a player like Jack Grealish in world football right now. So they've done the best that they could with the circumstances that they had. And it'll be interesting. I'm really gonna enjoy watching how their season turns out because I'm a neutral as towards Aston Villa. I don't really care how they do, but it's nice being a neutral when you know, it could go either one of two ways. So yeah, that'll be interesting.
All right, so that's our 10th to 15th finishers done, and it's time for the relegation fighters. So I have put Watford in 16th, Burnley in 17th, Southampton in 18th, Crystal Palace in 19th, and Norwich in 20th. So Southampton, Palace, and Norwich to go down. I mean, Cam, what are your bottom five?
As much as I want to relegate Southampton, I've got them in 16th. They are going to just stay up, literally just stay up. But there are clubs in a worse position than them, by not very much. But sadly for me, Southampton are in 16th. Watford, I have to stay up in 17th. I think very tight. I think the difference between Watford, I think, is just a little bit more Premier League experience and players like Troy Deeney, for example, who I think will just be that little difference in keeping them up. But it will be very close. Crystal Palace in 18th. I'm really concerned for Crystal Palace this season. They've seemed to have gone through this massive transition where they've let loads of their experience go. They've still got Zaha, but I don't think he is enough to keep them up anymore. And I think as a squad, they're a lot weaker. I'm not entirely convinced by Vieira as a manager, so I've got them down in 18th. Brentford, I've already touched upon. I think they're going to produce some exciting performances, but I just don't think it'll be enough to stay up. And Norwich, I think, compare their squad to 2 years ago, I think they've got a worse squad. I don't think they've solved a lot of the issues that they had, particularly with the physicality when they came up. And to me, they've just, as I said, I think the worst problem is they've let go of a lot of the good players that they had from their last Premier League campaign. Jamal Lewis, Buendia, they've not replaced them well. And so for me, Norwich will go down again in last place. So for me, going down this season, I've got Crystal Palace, Brentford, and Norwich.
All right, and Dan, your final five.
So yeah, so I made an error when I was counting before. So I've actually got Brentford, Burnley, Palace, Norwich, and Watford, with Southampton in that 15th spot. Okay. But yeah.
So what's it? Brentford, Burnley,
Palace, Norwich, Watford.
So, I mean, we've all got, as from what I can see, we've all sort of got the Palace, your Norwich, and your Watfords. I mean, why? I mean, from those three teams, why would you, Cam, say that those three are the most likely? You've mentioned, obviously, what Norwich could do, but especially, I think Palace is the team that most people wouldn't really think would. They've never really been at threat from going down. They've always seemed to be a team that's you're thinking you're 14th, you're 15th. They're always down there, but never down there. So I mean, they've got a new manager, but has that really changed that much?
But they've lost a lot of the players and a lot of the experience. I mean, if you look at someone like Van Aanholt, for example, he's not a top quality player, but he's experienced in that side. And Crystal Palace have let go of a lot of that experience. And I know there's this whole kind of sea change that Palace have been going on. They wanted to kind of move on from the Hodgson era, which a lot of people did feel was kind of starting to become a bit stale, was going nowhere. But I feel like I'd rather go nowhere than go backwards. Now, Vieira, I'm unsure of as a manager. He had a fairly decent record at New York City, but the MLS isn't really a stomping ground as a manager. His record at Nice, he got Nice took the Europa League in one season, nearly got them relegated the season after. So Vieira, I'm still mixed upon, and I think it'll be interesting to see how he does. For me, it just feels like the time is running out for Palace, and it was coming sooner rather than later. But I feel by letting go of a lot of the stability and a lot of the experience that has kind of kept them up in the last few seasons, I feel this time they're just going to go under. It'll be close. I think that battle between kind of Southampton, Watford, and Palace, and I'd say probably Brentford as well. In fact, all of those five teams I've got at the bottom, it's going to be very close, and it will go down to the final day. But I do just think this is the season where Palace go down, not necessarily by not winning loads of games. I think Palace will still grind out results like they tend to do, but I just don't see them performing well enough against a lot of the teams, particularly that they're competing against in the relegation battle, to keep them up. So, yeah, I feel Palace might need the champ. I feel it might be a good thing for Palace to have the championship to give them the chance to regroup and come back up stronger. But I just feel this season is one too much for them.
I mean, Dan, would you agree with that? I mean,
yeah, I'd agree. I mean, the signings that they've made, I don't think are bad signings. They've signed Guehi, another butchering of a name by me. I think he's a very good signing. They've signed Joachim Anderson. Haven't seen much of him, but he looks to be an experienced centre-back from Lyon. And then they've signed Michael Olise, who is a very exciting player. They've got an exciting three players in those sort of attacking mid-winger roles in Zaha, Olise, and Eberechi. But they have lost so much experience. I'm just looking through the transfers now. Van Aanholt has already been mentioned. Sacco, James McCarthy, Gary Cahill, Scott Dan. Not necessarily the best players, but just so much experience added into the fact that they've lost Roy Hodgson. And they've got an unproven manager in Patrick Vieira. I feel like they haven't necessarily got worse, but last season I thought they were one of the worst three teams. I thought they deserved to go down last season because they were just so stale. And apart from Zaha and Eberechi, just a really boring team to watch and not a very good one at
that. Yeah, but another team that me and Cam have got staying up, but you've got staying down, Dan, is Watford. I mean, why do you think Watford are going to round out the bottom of the table, even behind Norwich?
Well, Norwich had a great season in the Championship last season, and I still think they're going to go down. Watford weren't as good as Norwich last season, and Watford, if I'm not mistaken, are owned by the Pozzo family, the family which owns Udinese and has lots of involvement in football. And they seem to like to enjoy changing managers every other minute. The manager, I believe, is Xisco at the moment. I don't know why I've bothered to learn his name because he's not going to be there for very long, to be honest. I'd be so surprised if he's there by Christmas. I feel like I remember him as a player. But yeah, Watford are Watford. They've got Ismail Assar, great player. They've got Troy Deeney, good player on his day. I'd say more of a championship striker than Premier League striker, sort of in the Dwight Gale, Timu Pukki range, that sort of range. But without Ismail Assar, they'd have no chance. With Ismail Assar, because everything goes through him at Watford. With him, yeah, they could stay up, but I just think they're the worst team. Not by a long distance, because I think Norwich aren't a great team, but by a bit of a margin, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think my bottom five, I think they're quite a way off the rest of the table. I think maybe with the exception of Brentford, I might have been quite optimistic with them and they could easily be around there. But Watford, Burnley, Southampton, Palace and Norwich do seem to be the five teams that sort of will be around the relegation zone this season. Burnley have always been sort of, ever since they came seventh in I think it was a few years ago, they've sort of always been around that 15th, 16th, always staying up. And I do think they'll continue to stay up this season. But I do think it will be close between Watford, Burnley and Southampton for that last relegation spot. I think Norwich are pretty nailed on to go down. I think I can't really see Crystal Palace staying up. I think time might be up for them. But I could easily see Watford going down instead of Southampton, or even Burnley if they just have a bad season. I mean, Cam, have you got sort of two that you've got nailed on, and then one that maybe you would sort of put between three teams, or two between three teams, or what do you think?
I'd say Norwich is nailed on for me. I think they're definitely going down. I think Brentford aren't nailed on, but they very easily could go down, or very near to being nailed on, I would say. Crystal Palace is the one I think Vieira and the team could surprise them. I mean, Dan's mentioned a lot of the signings, and they are exciting young players. And there is, you mentioned that front three as well. That could be a very exciting front three, and that could be one that could get enough goals to win. But that's not really been the way that Palace has been playing, scoring lots of goals and winning matches that way. So I'm not sure it's necessarily going to be the way that Palace stay up. And you look at the defensive experience that's gone, I'm unsure about that, and whether they can replace that with an attacking threat that I think Vieira is more likely to play. And so for that, I think they're more likely to go down than Watford and Southampton, a lot due to that quite significant change. But I wouldn't say they're nailed on. And if they can get it right, then I would say probably they're more likely to stay up than Watford, and more likely maybe than Southampton. But I just don't think they're going to get such that radical change that I think they're likely to need and they're likely to want. I don't think they're likely to get that right. So, yeah, I'd say Brentford and Norwich are my two most likely to be pretty much nailed on in Brentford's case, certainly. Palace could stay up, and I could very easily see them staying up. But I think it's going to be very interesting to see how they get that change.
Okay. And Dan, I mean, how confident are you of your bottom three, or are there certain teams that you
Honestly,
would match?
I'm not confident at all. There's so many teams who, I think could go down that, I'm looking at the table now. I remember last season, Arsenal were in a relegation, let's call it battle, because it was in like November at one point, but they were, low, they were far down. There's so many teams who, if they just have a bad season, they can go down. There's not that many teams who can just take for granted their Premier League status. For example, like Everton, if they have a bad season, they could definitely go down. Newcastle have a bad season. Wolves. So many teams just have to have one bad season and they're down. It doesn't even have to be a terrible season. Just a bad season. Bad luck with injuries. Bad luck with form. And all just unlucky. And they can go down. So I wouldn't actually put money on any of the three that I've said going down. Actually going down. It's we've had one game of the season. We haven't had a chance to see how any of the new signings are going to fit in. Pre-season, you can't really draw too many conclusions from that. But yeah, I wouldn't actually put money on any of the three that I've said going down, because I'm terrible at predictions. But yeah, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, so I think that rounds off the Premier League table prediction that we've all set out. Again, as I say, we'll put all the tables in the description so we can come back to it at the end of the season and see how we did. But finally, I guess we'll just do some individual awards. So I'll ask each of you sort of for your player of the season and then golden boot. So Cam, who would be your player of the season and golden boot?
Golden Boot, I think for me with Chelsea winning the league is going to be Romelu Lukaku. He is going to be the difference between them winning the league this season and not. And I think he could easily get a 30-goal season out of Lukaku if he brings the Lukaku that was playing at Inter Milan over to Chelsea, which I think he will. And I'd say probably for that reason as well, Lukaku is probably going to be player of the season as well.
Okay. And Dan, who would you put as your Golden Boot and then your player of the season?
I was about to say Salah, and then I remember the African Cup of Nations. So I'm going to say Kane. Wherever he will be, I think it will be Kane. I just think he's, regardless of the circumstances that he's in, I just think he's that much of a better player than Lukaku that he will end up with the Golden Boot. And then player of the season, I'm actually going to go slightly left field. I'm going to say Jadon Sancho. I don't think many people, because he's been playing in the Bundesliga, realise how good he actually is. And for that, I'm going to say he's going to be my player of the season.
Okay. So, I mean, I'll come to mine. I think Golden Boot, it's quite hard to say because you're thinking your usual suspects might not really perform. Your Kane, is he really that motivated to keep playing for Tottenham, especially if he doesn't move? Salah, as you mentioned, African Cup of Nations, Vardy's getting a bit older. So Lukaku, maybe even a bit inconsistent. I think it's quite hard to say. I think I probably will go Salah. He's always seemed to be quite dependable. I think he will manage to overcome the African Cup of Nations. I don't know how many games he misses. I guess it depends on how far Egypt go in the competition, but I think he will overcome it. And you can always rely on Salah to get you 20 plus goals. Player of the season, I might go for Harry Maguire. I think, especially with United's defence over the last few years, I think Maguire's been quite underrated in it. I think he's not been seen as a defender on the calibre of your Ruben Dias's, your John Stones, even your Virgil van Dijk's. I think that Maguire has been underrated probably because he was too expensive signing from Leicester, but I do think he's a very good defender, and now I think that he's got that partner in Raphael Varane that United might have a very good defensive season, and it might just come down to whether the team can get the attackers firing throughout the season. So, yep. So my Golden Boot is Salah, and my player of the season is Harry Maguire. Other than that, I think we're all finished. So thank you for coming on, Cam and Dan. Have you got any last words? I'll come to Cam first.
Yeah, just on the point of player of the season quickly, I think if it doesn't go to Lukaku, if they don't want to give it to the Golden Boot winner, Kai Havertz, I think we saw just how he was starting to settle it under Tuchel last season. I'm talking up Chelsea so much because I genuinely believe you look at the team and the way they were playing towards the end of last season, I think Tuchel has really drilled those players, I think, into his style of football. I think tactically, the way that Tuchel will approach each game, particularly the big games as well, I think he really will know how to get those results out. And he knows where the talent is in his squad as well. And I think if he will get the best out of Havertz, Mount, Lukaku, if he can get Timo Werner going as well, that is going to be a very difficult set of players to stop you winning the league. This is an exciting season. I think the quality in the Premier League, I don't think has ever been higher. And we're seeing, despite the insane amount of high quality free transfers that PSG have pulled off this window, the quality in the Premier League at the moment, I don't think has ever been this good. And I think that's it. I think it's a testament to the Premier League and to just how much players want to come over and play in English football. And so I think how much investment has been put into the clubs here. But I think it's testament as well to the fact that there's a really strong base of supporters in England who I think when we saw with the Super League, I think really came out and showed just how much passion they have for the clubs. And I think that really motivates the players as well. And I think having fans back in the stadiums this season, I think it's going to be a fantastic season. It's going to be one of the closest, I think, potentially title fights we've seen in the last few years. I'm really excited. And if only Portsmouth could get out of League One and get back up to the Premier League in the next few seasons, it would make it even better.
Yeah, I mean, it would. I mean, Dan, have you got any final words to say?
Yeah, I think this is the season where the Premier League becomes the go-to sort of destination for the world's best players. You know, we've seen La Liga dominating in recent history with Real Madrid and Barcelona. You know, it seemed like all the really truly great players, their end goal was to end up at one of those two teams. I think that's going to change. Ronaldo and Messi are no longer there, so that's not the reason anymore you want to go to any of those teams. And yeah, Cam was saying about the quality in the Premier League, I think it's only going to get better. I think, you know, the signings that each of the big four have made, maybe with the exception of Liverpool, who have made Kanate, and that's it, are going to increase the quality of the Premier League. And I think, you know, future Ballon d'Or winners, Foden, Havertz, Sancho, all potential future Ballon d'Or winners, all in the Premier League. And perhaps with the exception of Havertz out of those I've named, they all look like they'll be in here, as in like Foden and Sancho look like they'll be here for the long haul, which is hopefully good for the Premier League. And hopefully it can become the league where the best players in the world finally end up instead of our league.
Yeah, so thank you for watching or listening, and make sure to join our Fantasy Premier League competition. I mean, just the code will be in the description, and obviously FPL is always a fun thing to get involved with. Welcome to any new freshers who are just checking us out. Like, this is Raw Sport. Cam does Raw News, and there's lots of other stations on departments on the Raw 12:51 a.m. network. So I've been your host, Will Kingswood. This has been Raw Sport, and thank you for listening.